and welcome to those who are here with us and those who will be watching after this program is concluded. I am Jamaica Jones, Program Coordinator with UofL Women's Center, and we are so thrilled to bring to you our campus talk, The Cost of a Vote, Voting Rights and Restoration in Kentucky. This program is sponsored by Vote Now Kentucky, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, Louisville Metro Office for Women, Engage Lead Serve Board, and Vote Everywhere. 2020 marks 100 years since the passing of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. However, more barriers were put in place, particularly for people of color to vote. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed, giving all the right to vote regardless of their gender, race, or identity. But unfortunately today, there are still people who either do not have the right to vote or continue to face a growing number of barriers to vote because of our current system in place. Tonight, we will hear from community activists who are fighting to not only bring education and awareness to our community on voting, but fighting to ensure that all have access and the right to vote. We will discuss general information on voting, absentee ballots, turnout, and barriers, in particular to those formerly incarcerated in Kentucky who some recently had their voting rights restored. This will be an opportunity for you to ask questions and find out what you can do in the fight for voting for all. And if you are to take one thing from tonight's program, it is ultimately to get out to vote and to help those in your communities vote. We do ask that you please keep your mics muted during our presentation in respect to our speakers here today and to lessen any potential outside noise since many of us are at home, so we understand dogs, kids, other outside distractions can happen. But we will have several opportunities for your participation. We will be sending out a brief evaluation after the program to also get your feedback. And if you have any questions throughout the duration of the program, you can definitely put those in the chat. But before we begin, I would want to start by asking, what is a vote worth to you and why are you voting? And you can put your answers in the chat. And if you're comfortable, you can click on the raise your hand option to speak and be called on. I will share for me, the vote is within our power. And if we truly want the changes that we need to get out there and vote. Is anyone else wanting to share? Quick. Or from any of our presenters who would be willing to share why they are voting and what a vote is worth to them. You should say that.
So, this is Savvy. This is Savvy Shabazz. I'm felony disenfranchised, so I'm not able to participate to vote, but I would like to share what that means. And I always use an analogy when I'm speaking about this, the importance of a farm. We know how a farm operates, so you have animals on the farm. We get those things that animals offer to our people and our communities so we can thrive in that community, right? So we have cows. Cows have milk to offer to keep that farm running. We have chickens. They lay eggs, and that's what they do. They lay eggs so we can keep that farm. They have something to give. The pig has nothing to give on that farm. The pig has to give its life in order for it to give its part, for that farm to continue to operate. That's how important it is to us to get out to vote, especially with me. We have to lay it on the line. We have to make a sacrifice to get to those polls and get out and vote. So like I said, I'm disenfranchised from felony convictions in my past, but that's how important getting people out to vote is to me.
Thank you for sharing. We have in the chat, someone said, voting is our power. Short and straight to the point. Anyone else would like to share why they are voting and what a vote is worth to them before we move on to our first presenters?
Oh, I'll go ahead and share something if I might. Jamaica, this is Tina. The person in the chat said voting is our power, and indeed it is. I think that the days are gone where people were told who to vote for and who was going to be the nominee and the candidate, and they were expected to support them. We are not in that situation anymore. We are actually able to see who our candidates and learn about our candidates. But but the catch is voting is how we choose to organize and how we choose to live together and how we choose to build a community together and who our leaders are, whether it's in your church or place of faith or your job or your local organization. We vote on our leadership and the ideas and the values that we share, and then we put those to action. Voting is the only way, hopefully, girded by a lot of community activism pushing us in the direction, but voting is the only way that we get to decide who our leaders are going to be and thus determine our future. And so even and especially when my candidate doesn't win, and I haven't won in a long time, by the way, I still have to vote because it's about my community and my country and not about my candidate. So that's why I'm voting.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Tina. And you're more than welcome to within the chat to share why you're voting, and we can get to shouting some of those out throughout the program. But I want to continue on, and I have the pleasure of introducing our first presenters, Shauntrice Martin, an abolitionist and mother. She serves as lead organizer at Kentuckians for the Commonwealth and director of Feed the West. We also have joining her Savvy Shabazz, a voting restoration advocate from Paducah, Kentucky. He serves as the president for All of Us or None here in Louisville and is a formerly incarcerated person. I will give the floor to them. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to share screen. Now, let me know if y'all can see it. I'm not great at Microsoft Teams. All right, can everybody see this?
Yep, we see it.
All right, perfect. So our main thing, I'm going to trust that Savvy doesn't have COVID and take my mask off. So the main thing we want to talk about today is voter empowerment. There are a lot of advertisements from politicians and things like that. We're focusing on nonpartisan things because we want folks to feel empowered to vote, no matter who the candidate is or the politics. All right, that's just a little bit about us. I love the introduction. Essentially, we put this here because a lot of people talk about politics but haven't been involved. I know Savvy has been in this fight for years, and I have as well. And it's an ongoing struggle. People think it's something that you can just do one time, one election, but really this is forever. This is an ongoing thing. So I want folks to drop in the chat, how many votes do you think it took to win the last general election? And I don't want you to Google it, just your best guess. How many votes do you think it took to win the last general election? And this is with Kentucky specifically. We had a general election for governor last year. So I want to see what y'all think. All right. Oh, wow. Okay, so I see 300. I see 555,000. All right, so some people may be surprised by this, but the last election for our governor was won by a little over 5,000 votes. We put this out because people don't realize the power of their vote. They don't realize how easy it can be to just get a voting block. We have so many people college age people, ages 17 to 24, who are registered to vote. But we'll see here, according to the Commonwealth of Kentucky State Board of Elections, that out of the 293,000 people who were registered to vote in that age group, only 65,000 turned out to vote. So that's 22%. That means if we can even double that number of participants in the voting process, we could potentially create a voting block. So a lot of the things that some of our younger voters are complaining about could be resolved. Now, voting is not going to solve every single issue, but if we look at these numbers alone, an additional 22% would be enough to sway an election, to change the type of legislation that we get, change sentencing laws and things like that. So I want folks to keep that in mind. The other thing we want to talk about briefly is just the voting timeline. A lot of people will get activated around this time, but then they have not registered by the deadline. In some states, you can just vote pretty much when you want to. Some states you can vote in the primary no matter what party you recognize as yours. But for Kentucky, we have one of the most difficult voting processes. We also have the earliest closing time. So a lot of places stay open past 6 p.m. But in Kentucky, our polling locations are only open till 6 p.m. And as we saw in the primary, that can be a hindrance. That can stop a lot of people from voting, because if you don't get off until 5, you're picking up the kids. Most jobs like McDonald's or your average job are not going to let you off just for election day. So we want to keep in mind that there are several different deadlines and milestones when it comes to voting. Number one is primary registration deadline, and then there's a primary election. Then you have the general registration deadline, the absentee ballot request deadline. Then there's absentee voting. It has its own period. There's in-person early voting, and then you have the general election, which is November 3rd this year. Is it November 3rd? Yeah, there you go. Correct. See, that's why you have a good partner. And this is the thing too, with COVID, a lot of these things have changed. In the primaries, we only had one polling location, all of Jefferson County. But this year for the general election, the county clerk has been pressured and has, given into a lot of our requests to have more than one polling location to make it more accessible. Because when there are things like limited polling locations and times, our rural communities are disenfranchised, our people of color are disenfranchised, our low income folks are disenfranchised. And so we want to make sure that we're giving every access point possible. All right, so we're going to give you 5 quick facts about voting in Kentucky. Number one, 100,000 Kentuckians had their rights restored last year when Governor Beshear came into office. And Savvy will talk a little bit more about that soon, but that's really important. That's a significant number. There are still over 200,000 people who have not had their rights restored, so we're working to do that long term. Number 2, Kentucky had more absentee ballot requests for the primary than the general election. That's important because a lot of people, because of the disenfranchisement and some of the voter suppression that happened during the primary, are a little bit disillusioned with the process. So it's important for us to continue this work in reaching out for voter empowerment. Number 3, not a great fact, but more than 100 absentee ballots were found in the dumpster this month. That's something to really consider when we're advising people on how to vote. Because of COVID, folks are not trying to go in person and be around crowds. And so absentee voting was supposed to be a way to prevent people from having exposure to COVID. Unfortunately, things like voter suppression and these missing absentee ballots or postmarking are causing people's votes not to be counted. So we have to be vigilant throughout the election season. Number 4, there are 181,000 Kentuckians between the ages of 18 and 24. This is important because, as I mentioned earlier, we can create whole voting blocks. And I'm not advocating for a specific position or party. The main thing we have to realize is that we do have power. Things like Breonna's Law and these no-knock warrants being banned are only going to pass if we have more people who are out there at the polls. And then finally, number 5, the 2016 election had 61% voter turnout in Jefferson County and about 60% statewide. That's one of the highest voter turnout numbers we've ever seen in this state. And last year, I think it went down to about 58%. So it's important to look at these things. And the Kentucky Board of Elections has all these statistics. You can also look at the U.S. Census, and the Courier Journal is actually really good about keeping up with these sort of historical data points. All right, so I'm gonna have Savvy read this, even though he might not have been prepared to do that. So one person I want to highlight is Alberta Odell Jones. A lot of people don't know about her. Alberta Odell Jones was a real pioneer. She has so many accomplishments, and people don't realize just how important she has been to the struggle for voting rights for Black people in Louisville specifically, but also generally across the country. So I'm gonna have Savvy read off these just to give y'all a break from my voice.
Thank you for the violent code-ism. So in 1956, Alberta Jones was the first African American to attend UofL's law school. In 1959, she was one of the first African American women to pass the Kentucky bar. In 1960, she was the first attorney for the rising boxer Cassius Clay, as we know as Muhammad Ali. In the 1960s, she created the Independent Voters Association and registered 6,000 African Americans. In 1964, she was appointed as the first woman of any race to become city attorney in Louisville. In February of 1965, she was appointed as prosecutor for the Domestic Relations Court. She was the first woman or a person of color. She was responsible for prosecuting mostly white men for spousal abuse.
Thank you, Savvy. So this is important because a lot of the work that happens around Louisville, it's moving. It's work that's moving because of people like Katora Heron, Chanel Helm. You have our representative Attica Scott. You have all these Black women who are doing this really important work, but often are left out of history. So when we talk about voter empowerment, it's really important to recognize the Black women and other people of color and disenfranchised folks who have done a lot of this work. I didn't know until this year about all that she has done. While I heard her name before, I didn't realize just how monumental she was, especially with voter registration and creating spaces for Black people to learn about the process, not just saying like, go vote for this specific candidate, but making it imperative that people learn about the process and what sort of legislation is up. Often people focus too much on the candidates and don't realize just how much is at stake with the rest of our vote. All right, so I want everybody to drop in the chat, what is a reason that some people choose not to vote? We talked earlier about why we vote, but what is a reason you think some people choose not to vote? And I'm gonna give y'all just a minute or so. Yeah, I did. All right, Jamaica, I don't know if you can see the chat. I can't see it from the presentation, but we'll share that out here in a bit. And I'll go ahead and move to the next slide. So Savvy is gonna take over a little bit from here to talk about voting rights restoration.
Greetings, thanks for the introduction, Shauntrice. So I want to do a little history, and I'll start with the 1980s. So in the 1980s, we were faced with the crack epidemic and the war on drugs that disproportionately disenfranchised Black people and Black communities. And this led to the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. This was first introduced by President Nixon. It was enforced by President Reagan, and it was also used with President Clinton as well. So we moved on to the 1990s, the 1994 crime bill. Speaking of the three strikes bill, we led right into Bill Clinton. So this 1994 crime bill is what led to mass incarceration. And it was the introduction to the three strikes law. This meant if a person, pretty much, if a person got in trouble 3 times, that was it. You're going to do a lot of time. And a lot of those sentences actually ended up being life sentences, especially in states like California and Arizona. So we look into the 2000s. We start facing harsher sentencing laws, and the racial discrimination increased. Some of these were actually a bill that we're actually working on now that still exists, which is the persistent felony offense. This means that a person can catch a charge for the most, a nonviolent offense, and that charge will carry 5 to 10 years. But with this persistent felony offense, that charge is enhanced into a 10 to 20-year sentence. They also have over-sentencing acts. That was one of the bills that actually came in as well. So that's one of the bills that we're actually working on as far as being over-sentencing. Because we try to remove the PFO, and we actually run into what we call enhancements. So if a person has a Class C offense, If he gets out within a certain particular time, and he has another charge, he can face that PFO. And sometimes that PFO is a first degree, and it can be a second degree. A first degree will carry a mandatory 10-year sentence. So we look into 2019, 100,000 Kentuckians got their voting rights restored. What does that look like? That gave the opportunity for a lot of individuals that had past felony convictions to get their rights back and go to the polls. I had an experience with that. I was one of the individuals that bill did not restore the voting rights for. And it plays back into the 1990s and 2000s, which I spoke about with the Over-Sentencing Act. So I was sentenced to a total of 28 years for nonviolent felony offenses. So I served a total of 5.5 months. And once I was released, I've been on parole for the last 14 years. And that's one of the issues that we have with the bill. We never got an opportunity to actually sit down with people that write the bills for people like myself. So that was one of the issues with the bill. So some of the work that we're actually doing is getting as many of those people to the polls and making sure that they know they got their rights restored. So we're in the second phase of that, and we're getting as many people that got their rights restored to the polls. Some of the work that we've been doing has spanned across from Louisville to Hopkinsville, all the way to Paducah, and throughout West Kentucky as well. Just making sure that those individuals get to the polls. Collectively, I think with just my organization and a few more organizations, I think we reached out and actually contacted at least 65,000 of those individuals across the state of Kentucky.
All right, thank you, Savvy. And when we talk about this sort of work, it's really important it's really important to engage the actual community you're trying to help. A lot of people, from what I've seen in the last year, once those folks got their rights restored, a lot of organizations just said, okay, go vote for the candidate I want you to vote for, instead of first asking, like, what do you need? Not just during election season, but before and after, because the real work happens after election day, after we know which laws were passed and which people got into office. And oftentimes people who have a felony in their past are disregarded and they're just used for their vote. Similarly, Black people, people of color, women, folks who are disabled, are all discarded after the election. But it's really important in this work to have that community, and having someone like Savvy in the work, leading the work, is really important. All right, so we got a few action items for folks. Number one is to sign up to volunteer. Protectthevote.net is a really great place to start. We are focused on nonpartisan ways you can support people's voter rights. KFTC has phone banks and lit drops happening. You can go to KentuckyDemocracy.org/volunteer. And then the third way, of course, is to vote. It's really important, if you have the ability to vote. It's not just about candidates and individuals. It's not just about the general election for president. There are so many pieces of legislation that are out there that could potentially harm our most marginalized groups. And so we have to be vigilant in understanding what those pieces of legislation mean. For those of you who don't already know, this is a list of where to vote. So there are a few 2020 locations that are close to campus, and you can vote, honestly, at any of these for early voting, and also on the actual day on Tuesday. So Kentucky Center for African American Heritage, Louisville Marriott East, Kentucky Expedition Center, the KFC Yum Center, and you can get a full list with times, and there's free parking at all of them. You can get a full list on the county clerk's website or KFTC, and other places too. Urban League is doing free rides to the polls and things like that, which we'll learn about later. All right, so that wraps it up for our section of the presentation. We would love for you to connect with us wherever you are. And I think that you all will get my email address at the end.
Thank you. And I know you have to hop off, but would you have time if people had a couple of questions to ask, or do you have to hop? So anybody have any questions for Shauntrice or Savvy before they have to hop off? And if you have any that you think of afterwards, you can put in the chat, just indicate who it's for, and also in the evaluation. That way I can send it their way. Because I'm sure you'll probably think of a question later on. But does anyone have any questions real quick? I think there might be some people in the chat typing real quick. But again, thank you both, like seriously, for sharing all of this information. Of course, your personal experience, Savvy, and just really why everyone should be having this power and right to vote. I mean, it's insane. But if we don't have any questions, I will let you guys hop off. And again, thank you both so much for sharing this with us and being here today.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, Honey Goldman. She is a Louisville native and a community activist and organizer who has spearheaded numerous grassroots movements on women's rights and often writes editorials for the Courier Journal on social issues. She is organizer and executive director of Vote Now Kentucky, the first nonpartisan GOTV effort in the county that concentrates on those who do not vote, Generation Z, millennials, and low turnout precincts. She is the founder and chair of Reproductive Rights for Kentucky, the only federal pro-choice PAC in Kentucky, as well as the chair of the District 8 Advisory Council and the recent president of the Upper Highlands Neighborhood Association. And I love this next thing. Her motto is, "Who have you pissed off today?" Honey Goldman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. What I was going to say, in looking at the chat, people are talking about the things that I hear all the time, especially from millennials and from Generation Z. They don't like the candidates. Well, guys, that's who you got. So if you don't vote, you're really voting for the other person. So pick the candidate that you dislike the least, if that is the word. But your vote is so important. You had, in Kentucky, you had one representative that won by one vote. Many representatives are winning by 5, 10, maybe 20 votes. You all got more friends on Facebook and on Instagram and Snapchat than you do with this margin of error. So your vote is extremely, extremely important, and it does matter. The other is that we don't make it easy in Kentucky to vote, as you well know. However, this election is wonderful. It really gives people everything that we have wanted. Early voting, extended hour times, voting on Saturday. Anybody can get an absentee ballot. If you don't vote, that's going to go away, because we want to be able to say to all the legislators, see, this works. Change the law. And you've got some old fuddy-duddies like Stivers and Osborne. Yes, they're Republicans, and they want to go back to the old way. Well, the old way had maybe 20%, if we were lucky, of people coming out to vote. So now we're looking at maybe a record of 80% of people in Louisville that can vote, that are casting their ballots. And that's great. This is democracy in action. This is your democracy. This is your future. And if you have any questions about voting, look, it's not an SAT test. So you don't have to fill out the entire ballot. All you have to do is go and pick the candidates that you want to vote for, and that's it. The drop boxes, if you have gotten an absentee ballot, well, first of all, if you haven't gotten your absentee ballot, if you've had applied for one and it has never shown up, go vote now. You have until, well, you can't do it today, but tomorrow from 8:30 to 4:30, you can go to any place, any of the 4 places to go vote. There, people are giving rides. Lyft is giving rides through one of the campaigns. Urban League is giving rides. Just give them a holler. Call up one of the political parties They have a list of people. They're not giving rides, but they have a list of organizations that are giving rides. And so it's really, really important. I cannot stress it enough. And the line that I always say is, I'm old. I'm not going to be here in 25 years. You all will be. You are creating your democracy. You are creating your laws. And all these laws affect you. One of the other things that I often get is, I don't know if I'm registered. If you don't know if you're registered to vote, my guess is you probably are. So go to govoteky.com, govoteky.com, and see if you are registered to vote. It doesn't make any difference what party you are in. This is a general election. The other is, if you are voting in person, make sure that the poll worker has given you the right ballot. When you walk in, you'll give your information to a poll worker. They will write on a slip of paper what your precinct is. Just check it against the ballot, because we don't want you voting for somebody that you don't want to vote for. There are 175,000 absentee ballots in Jefferson County that were sent out. Only 130,000 have been returned. So there are 40,000 absentee ballots that have not been returned back. If you are one of those 30,000, do not mail it. Under no circumstances mail it. Take it into one of the drop boxes at any of the voting locations. The county clerk's office will do it. If you can do it on Saturday, you can do it from 8:30 to 4:30, and you can do it on election day. And you don't have to stand in line. If there's a line of people waiting to vote, just go right, because the voting drop boxes are right there. All you do is just go in, drop it in, and you're wonderful. If anybody has any questions, please, you can certainly email me. You can certainly, and I will be more than glad to answer them. You can find a sample of your ballot at govoteky.com. Govoteky.com is probably the only thing that the government has ever done in Kentucky that works. And it works beautifully. So you can find out if you're registered. You can track your ballot if it's an absentee ballot. You can see that they've gotten it. And if they haven't gotten it, get on down to the one of the voting sites and go cast your ballot in person. If you can find out who your elected officials are, you can find out, print out an absentee, a sample ballot and take it with you. One of the other questions I get is, how do I know who to vote for? And here's my line. Look at the candidates' websites. See who has endorsed them. See who shares your values. The other is, ask your friends. Ask people that you know and trust and like who they are voting for. Voting may be an individual thing, but it's a community effort. We've got to talk it up. We've got to make sure that everybody knows it's okay to vote. The other thing I say is, ask your relatives. If you got a relative that you don't like, ask them who they're voting for and then vote for the other candidate. Tina's putting some wonderful information on in the chat box about where to vote. On election day, there's going to be 16 other locations. Again, get yourself down there. If you can vote early, please do. Avoid all the traffic and all the other problems. And yes, and you can drop off your ballot at any time but before 6 o'clock on November 3rd, because after 6 o'clock at 6:01, we all turn back into mice, horses, pumpkins, whatever. I will on Halloween be giving out candy in a very COVID safe way, but I will also be giving out sample ballots to the children that come to my door, because I bribe them and I say, if you want a piece of candy, you have to give a sample ballot to your parent or guardian, and it works. So feel free to do that. The other is, I cannot express how badly your vote is needed. Even if you don't like the candidates, find someone that you dislike the least. If you are doing an absentee ballot and you've made a mistake, like maybe you've torn out the proverbial flap, don't worry about it. They're being very lenient this time. Put the flap in the envelope and just make sure that the flap is in the envelope. If you forget to sign it in one place, but you have signed it in another place, it's going to be okay. You will be fine. Just vote. And not only do I need for you to vote, does the country need for you to vote? No pressure. But, and now I forgot what I was going to say. What can I say? Okay. Anyway, yes, please vote. Any other questions? You can always. Pardon?
So I have a question. So let's say I've been waiting forever to get my absentee ballot. And just from the stress of waiting and with November 3rd looming, I could go and vote early voting, correct? And if so, let's say I get my absentee ballot after going to go vote. What do I do with that document?
Recycle the paper.
Awesome.
Because when you go to vote, it will say, the poll worker will say, I'm sorry, you've asked for an absentee ballot. And you will say, never got it. And they said, sign this piece of paper. And you sign this piece of paper, and that will invalidate your ballot. The poll workers mean well, but they sometimes don't have all the correct information. So if you're getting a piece of information that you don't think is right, ask to speak to a supervisor. Suppose you go there and they say, I'm sorry, but you're not registered. And you know you are, because you've checked govoteky.com. And you can take a picture of it if you want and show it to them. And they may say, sorry, you are not on the rolls. And at that point, you say, let me speak to the supervisor. And the supervisor comes over and either gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if they give you a thumbs down, you go, okay. You go down to the Board of Elections and you say, you're supposed to be registered to vote. And they look at it and they either give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if it's a thumbs down, your next line is, I want to talk to the judge. And they will have circuit court judges at the Board of Elections that will review it, and that they will issue an order that says that you can vote. But again, all that has to be done before 6 o'clock. The other is, I'm looking at my little cheat sheets. One of three ways: absentee ballot, in person before election, in person during election. You will need some type of ID. They are asking for a photo ID. Your school ID will be great. If you don't have it, take some type of an ID with you, even a credit card, and go there, and they will have you sign something that says that you just could not get your ID. Here's the other thing that you may want, that very few people know about, is suppose you sprain your ankle and you cannot get to the polling place. Call up and ask for an emergency medical ballot, and they'll take your information over the phone. You send somebody down, not you, but you send somebody down to pick up your ballot. They bring it back to you, you fill it out, and then your designated person can either take it back to the Board of Elections or put it in a drop box. Anything else? Oh, who is they? That you call on. Thank you, Tina. You call the county clerk's office, and their number is 502-574-6100. All of this information is also on our website, votenowky.org. It's downloadable. If you want to download any of this information and just pass it around, when you go to Starbucks or when you go to McDonald's or wherever you go and you're driving through the drive-through and picking up your food, ask them, are you voting? And some of them will say, yes, we're voting. And others will say, well, I don't know. Tell them how important it is for them to vote. We need to have everyone's vote. Jefferson County is the key for this election, just as it was for Andy. We put him over the top with 5,000 votes. We're going to have, this is again what is going to happen. The other is, if there's a candidate that you like and that you really want them to win, go work for that candidate. They need you the last few days. Call up the campaign and say that you want to volunteer, whether it's making phone calls, whether it's not passing out literature, whatever it is, get that person to win. One of the questions I also get is, why can't we vote on our phones? Which is a wonderful question. And you got a bunch of old fogies who are not used to phones and they're not used to internet, and it scares them. However, this is the future. We will be voting on our phones. And it's up to you to change that. And the way you change that is find a candidate that will support that. And go and work for that candidate and get them elected. And if you cannot find a candidate that supports your ideas and that you run for office. We need you to run for office, because look who's running the country now. And they're not very good in the most cases. So we need you to run for office as well. All right. Anything else? You could always.
Question I have gotten from students is it's kind of like a two-parter, but same type of idea. So is it too late? So if a student wanted to work the polls, and if it is, thinking of in the future, how would that process go about for them to be able to work the polls? And if I'm correct, don't they get some sort of payment to do so?
Yes, they do. And it would be nice if it was more than minimum wage. They can call the county clerk's office, see if they need more poll workers. I think there's a form. It's a hard job. You have to get there like by 5:30 a.m. You cannot leave until all the ballots are counted and people have voted. If you're in line at 6 o'clock, no matter how long that line is, you can still vote. So the poll workers have to stay there until every person who's allowed to vote can vote. And they have to then clean up and make sure all the ballots are secure. And so some poll workers, I mean, it's more than a 12-hour day. And, you know, more power to them.
Do we have any more questions for Hani before we move on to our last presenter?
I'm going to be around. If anybody thinks of anything, just put it in the chat box and I'll text you back.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this information with us, Hani.
And I want to know that every single one of you have gone out and voted and have taken people with you to vote. Bye.
Thank you. So our last presenter is former Metro Councilwoman Tina Ward Pugh, who was elected to the first Louisville Metro Council in November 2012 and represented the 9th District. After 16 years of elected public service, she did not seek re-election in 2014 in order to work full-time for Hillary for America. She had the honor of working in Iowa, Colorado, Arizona, and her hometown here in Louisville, Kentucky during the primary. She moved to Ohio in June of 2016 and lived there until the general election was over in November. A primary mission that emerged from these experiences is the call to focus on building a stronger democracy through a variety of ways, especially through educating and empowering individuals and groups to better understand the governing process and the responsibilities of voting. She returned to public service in February 2018, this time as a director of the Louisville Metro Office for Women under and Community Services Department. She hopes to use the resources of the office to continue to elevate the status of women here at home and beyond. And kind of a side note, I also served as an intern for her during this past year, so definitely a great place to get to see how the government side of things operate. But I'm going to give the floor to Tina.
Thank you so much, Jamaica. It's my pleasure to be with you. The only slight correction about the time frame, the first Metro Louisville Council was in 2003, and I served on it for 12 years. And so I'm delighted to be here, and I'll just brag on you just for a minute, setting the curve for all my student interns, just really did a fine job. Proud of the U of L and the work that you've done. And Valerie Casey at the U of L Women's Center as well. We are glad to be a part of this event and others as well. So some of what we have done since I came back from Ohio and am not doing what I was supposed to be doing had we won in 2016 was really, bringing to the forefront the importance of voting and how our democracy and what it looks like counts on, and that is those of us who vote and who we vote for. And so I've had a long time passion for trying to improve the status of women and girls. I woke up when I was 30 years old in 1990 in graduate school, and began to realize the importance of, again, how we structure ourselves. So what I first did was I got involved helping elect women judges. After all, whether we like it or not, it is true who we have on the benches at every level makes the difference, because legislators, like I was on the Metro Council and on the Board of Aldermen for 4 years, we can write the laws, we can make laws all day, but when they're challenged, we depend on the judges and ultimately justices to interpret the law and hopefully interpret it in the manner in which we intended it. So it became evident that what I found was women brought a different perspective, a more holistic perspective, a connection, if you will, to their thinking and to how process and it became clear to me that having women judges it is excuse me, it is an answer to ensuring that we remain focused on values and building community and building strength and supporting families and problem solving in ways that weren't just punitive in nature, but also taking into account, the whole perspective. I mean, the family court was formed here in Jefferson County in the 90s because people that I helped elect, who are magnificent women, brought a different perspective and said, we can't keep shifting these same families to 4 different courts for the same issue. We've got to create one court for them, for one judge for us to be successful with this family. And again, not be about being punitive. And so, I was behind the scenes, never planned on running for office. And then I got involved when Melissa Mershon left the Board of Aldermen and Scotty Green threw his hat in the ring to be the first ward alderman. And I had considered doing that, but didn't do it. He had a little bit of an early start, and he was a good candidate. We shared the same values and perspectives on issues. And so I decided to get involved in his campaign. And it was an opportunity for me to not only learn behind the scenes what goes on, how much work and effort it takes. And of course, this was back in the early 90s, just shortly after my first presidential campaign with President Clinton. And, basically we just worked our volunteers. We knocked on doors, we dropped off literature, we made phone calls, we wrote handwritten letters to people in their voter rolls that people would stop by the office, the headquarters, and go through these just pages and pages and pages of registered voters. Oh, I know them. And they would write a card, a note on their own stationery that said, hey, I'm voting for Scotty Green. You might not know him, but I do. He's a great guy. Hope you'll consider it. They put their little, return seal on it and hand address the envelope. And then 3 days before the election, we would drop them all. And I can't tell you how many people, at least 5 or 6 people came up to me the day of the election and said, oh my gosh, I've got your letter here because I didn't know who I was going to vote for. And I trust you and I know you're involved and, we share a lot of the same values. And so I'm voting for Scotty Green. Well, let me tell you, it was a 3-person race and he won. He'd only lived here for 2 years. He won by 52 votes. 52 votes. It was just too much to believe, but we had accomplished that. He hired me to be his legislative assistant, and that's how I myself got into public service. And when he left, I jumped into the arena myself. But the point is voting. We put somebody in office who was for fairness. For LGBTQ rights, somebody who was for on some level, police civilian review oversight. He was for, progressive ideas and ideals, and that rubbed off on me, and I began to learn government myself. And so, what you need to know partly about what Hani said that you have to think about is we are the government, whether I'm in an elective office and whether I'm in an appointed office or I'm in the office I am now with the Office for Women, as a social worker, because that is my vocation, a macro social worker. The government is us. And, if you don't run for office, if you don't find people who do run for office, if you don't yourself decide to go into public service or civil service, we get what we get. And democracy's messy and it's hard. I recall I was in elective office for 16 years. And that whole time, I got to vote for the thing I was for, the whole thing I was for in 16 years, maybe 5 or 6 times. Every other vote I took was a vote towards the thing I wanted, because you got to get there. And sometimes it takes longer than we wished it would. But the more people that you bring along as you vote and as you progress, the more the community supports the initiative that you're working on. And so I got to say, I tell people all the time, I didn't like some of the votes that I cast myself, because I was for something far more progressive than what it was. But it was important at the time for me to bring some Republican moderates like Julie Rocky Adams and Ellen Call, who were Republican moderates on the Metro Council. It was important to bring them along, because that meant that their constituents were now not going to get to talk bad about the Democrats and me and anybody else, because their representative that they supported was now supportive of the initiative. And so that's how it works. But the key is, I think, and the thing that I say the most often is, there are no perfect candidates. You have to stop looking for them. They are not out there. You will be disappointed every time. I may have worked for Secretary Clinton's on staff for her campaign in 2016, but I did not agree with every position she held. And I don't still with some of her positions. But let me tell you, I'm voting for what I'm for. And that's not a perfect candidate. That's a candidate that shares my values, that wants to move us in the right direction, the direction that values diversity, that values human potential, that values wherever you are on the spectrum and the scale, everywhere, and who'll stand up and fight for you on those things. And so what I tell people all the time is, make you a little checklist. Put the two candidates side by side. What are your top 5 issues or priorities? Are they reproductive freedom for women? Is it LGBTQ rights? Is it fair housing? Is it restoration of felony voting rights? What are those issues that are important to you? And put the two candidates side by side. Okay, just put the two candidates, whoever they are, at whatever level, whether it's school board, Metro Council, mayor, circuit court clerk, or judges, or your state legislature and your governor. Just make little check boxes. With this candidate, almost is that. No, this one's against everything I'm for. This one is for 2 of the things I'm for. Well, let's think about this. You're not voting for the person who's for 2 of the things you're for, who can help you move those 2 things forward. Is a wasted vote. It's like Connie said, it's a wasted vote. And it was your chance. It was your chance to not just express your vote, but it was your chance to be a part of the collective will of the community. Because this is the thing. It's sad and disheartening, but there were lots of people who regretted their not voting for the Democrat in 2016 in the general election, because they said, I would have voted, but I was sure she was going to win anyway. And, she wasn't my favorite candidate. I knew she was going to win by a landslide. And so, but if I had known it was going to be close, I would have voted. Well, this is the thing. If anybody on any level, but we'll just take the presidency, if they are elected with 52% of the vote of the country, all of those people in those same parties who have those differing perspectives around the country, in the state legislatures, all the way down to your local legislatures, who follow that same, have that same political party. If the president or other senators and congresspeople are elected by 52, 51, 52, 53%, that means the progressives can't be as progressive as they want to be, because that means they're going to have some people who are not as progressive, but who want to get reelected because they want to continue to do good. So this is the difference. Can you imagine if we elect a president in whatever party you have? Can you imagine if we elect a president with more than 60% of the vote? The freedom that those senators and congresspeople, the freedom that they will have, and the assurance that they will have that the people they represent really share the same values as them. So they're going to get to step out and be a little bit more open about their being progressive, because they have a mandate. And so, in every election from Metro Council to the governor to you name it, it is always important to win as big as you can win, because that means you get to bring others who might not be as forward or might be a little more cautious than you are, but share the same position on issues. That might get them some comfort to come with you, and you can move your agenda forward more rapidly because you have those numbers. So right now we're in a building phase. We need every vote. Like Connie said, I work for Metro government. I am a Democrat. I was an elected Democrat. My mayor's a Democrat. But the Office for Women is a partner with Vote Now Kentucky as a nonpartisan member, women's group member of Vote Now Kentucky, because we believe that everybody should get out and vote. We just want people to be mobilized to vote. I don't ask them who they're voting for. I don't tell them what party I am or anything else. I just want to get them to vote, because when people vote, then we can really begin to assess where our nation and where our community really is. And then we can do what the first presenters, I can't think of her name. Is it Sharisa?
Shauntrice and Savvy.
Shauntrice and Savvy. It's like they said, there's work to be done after you vote, because the vote tells you perhaps, where people are and what's affecting their lives. And so we can't just go vote. We have to vote, and then we have to pick up the pieces and be partners, with everybody in that to continue building our community and moving our community forward. And so the Office for Women was excited to be a part of this year-long celebration for women's suffrage and the 100th anniversary and the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, which was passed in 1965. As Jamaica mentioned earlier, even though the 19th Amendment in 1920 gave women the right to vote, some of those very same white women who'd worked so hard beside the Black women worked then to say, well, no, we were just talking about us. We weren't talking about all women. So then you had the amendments progressing after that until the 25th Amendment, which was the Voting Rights Act in 1965, which did give people of color, women of color, especially, the right to vote. And can you imagine can you imagine in 1972 for Black women to not have been able to vote for Shirley Chisholm for president? Would have been outrageous, would have been unthinkable. But if you think about it, it was only 7 years later that Shirley Chisholm ran for president that Black women really got the right to vote. And so that was that was in my lifetime. I mean, that was in my lifetime. And so it's important celebrating the 100th anniversary and the 55th anniversary. And so one of the ways we led up to this, we started 2 years ago. We're going to be doing it again this year on Election Day. Is in the general election, we have something called Thank a Suffragist. And basically, we've created signs. Oh, I wish I had one. I may have to holler to go get one. We've created big yard signs that have a beautiful piece of art that says a suffragist lies here. And I've created a short little bio on these women. And what we've done is we've gone to Eastern Cemetery, Cave Hill Cemetery, Louisville Cemetery, and the Temple. And we're adding Greenwood this year. And people, researchers, not me, but people like Professor Emerita at UofL, Carol Mattingly, Dr. Mattingly, and others have done some exceptional research and writing, hunting down these suffragists. And in particular, Dr. Mattingly trying to hunt down and find and honor as many African-American suffragists as possible. And so we go out, we'll be going out this Sunday, we'll be planting those signs on about maybe 20 different grave sites, and we'll have magic markers, Sharpies at each of the sites, and you can go to the site and you can sign your name to thank a suffragist for what they did. And so these are actually women in Louisville, who actually fought for and were a part of suffrage. And not just suffrage for the right to vote, but all of those things that led to the building of our network of our community, the mothers clubs, the first kindergarten, the first African-American superintendent, just amazing women who lived and died and who have helped build our community. It's just a simple way, back in 2008, up in New York, a lot of people went and voted for then Senator Clinton for president. And because she's from New York, and so was Susan B. Anthony, they all went straight to Susan B. Anthony's grave and they tore off their little I voted sticker and they plastered Susan B. Anthony's gravestone and almost ruined it. Because of the, the sticky stuff. And so one of the things that people began to do is try to find another way to honor the suffragists. Clearly, if it hadn't been Susan B. Anthony was one of the key players, as was Ida B. Wells and Sojourner Truth and Carrie Cat Chapman. And so this sort of is an evolution of how we're thanking a suffragist and thanking women who have fought for our right to vote. We'll be doing that again this year on Election Day. We'll have a tent set up just inside the Cave Hill Cemetery entrance at Baxter. I think it's 701 Baxter Avenue. It's right there where Broadway and Baxter come together. We have a gift bag that has some fabulous stuff in it. Including a booklet that Cave Hill Foundation has put together that has bios on a number of these suffragists, and also a map, if you will, a very rudimentary map of the 4 cemeteries in there for you to go. And, we've got little coin purses with Centennial logos on them. We've got bandanas that have Rosie the Riveter with her COVID mask on and BLM, and our office logo on it. Louisville Water Company, water bottles, Filson Historical Societies, bookmarkers, a free ticket to the Fraser History Museum suffrage exhibit. You have to go. You can't believe it. You have to go. And so we'd love for you to stop by between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Election Day. That's Tuesday, November the 3rd. As I said, though, we'll be leaving. We're putting those signs up on Sunday, and they'll be coming down the following Sunday. They'll be up from Sunday to Sunday. So if you can't make it out Election Day, they'll have the swag bags and stuff inside the actual entrance at Cave Hill there, and they're open till 4:30 every day. So get there before 4:30. You'll get your bag, which has all the stuff in it. Then you can go visit. So there'll be markers and signs there. We'd love for you to stop by and sign your name, thank a suffragist. If you get one of the little, I think they may give away the little bracelets now. It was fun last year when we went around to collect some of the signs. People had taken off their bracelet and tied it to the little wickets that hold up the yard signs. And so, you know, it was just a great day. It's going to be another great day, regardless of who you vote for. I hope what you've heard tonight has helped you understand the urgency of voting, not just in the presidential election, I believe, as Hani and Jamaica and the others had mentioned, but every election, because every election has consequences. And some of them are devastating, and some of them you can't come back from some of them for decades. And so can't urge you enough. Vote and consider getting involved in your local government. I guess the last thing I'll tell you is what I say people all the time. You know, nonprofits and businesses will come and go, and not necessarily for bad reasons, but your government will always be here, and it will always be leading this community based on who we have voted into office to be our leaders. And so we have jobs open for people who are interested in housing and creating solutions for our eviction crisis and our lack of affordable housing. We have openings for people who want to run numbers and do data, you know, people who want to try to create paid family leave, you know, and I just can't emphasize enough, serving your community in however way you can. I hope that you'll consider it your government on some level at some point. And we'd welcome you to put an application perhaps for an internship, and would love to have you consider that as well. So I'll put my email right now in the chat. If anybody wants to send me an email, I'm working from home these days because of COVID, of course. But if you will email me, I get those. Don't panic if I don't contact you the day you send it. But I promise you I will get back with you, and hopefully we can continue to partner together. I see Phyllis Webb has joined on, and again, Valerie Casey for leading the office for the UofL Women's Center. Appreciate the good work that y'all always do, and the phenomenal work that Jamaica continues to do. Honored to be a part of this event tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. And I mean, I'm completely biased, but I always enjoy getting to work with you and Office for Women. If there were any students that maybe want to get involved with specifically Thank the Suffragist Day, are there like volunteer opportunities, whether putting up the stuff on Sunday or even the day of? Are there any opportunities for students?
Thank you for that question, Jamaica. It is kind of limited because of COVID, but if there's anybody out there who wants to meet up at 10 a.m. on Sunday morning at Cave Hill, there are a couple of us who are meeting up there, and we'll be dividing up the signs to go to the 4 different cemeteries. And I will also say that if people don't know this, Eastern Cemetery is adjacent to Cave Hill. So literally you would get the signs and either walk the sidewalk and go into Cave Hill, or drive back around and drive up into Eastern Cemetery and do this and plant the signs. So, you know, let me know if you're coming, so we'll look for you on. I forgot to mention we're also going to be planting an American flag with each of the signs as well. So that's about it for now as far as volunteer opportunities. But keep us in mind in the future.
Thank you. And I know, especially the younger generation, I'm getting to that point to where I can say the younger generation. If you guys want to thank a suffragist via social media, you can tag What Is a Vote Worth Lou. They're on Instagram and Facebook, so we can share some of those things as well. And also to, keep up with some of the things happening in the city, because I know COVID did make a lot of these events celebrating voting in Louisville and Kentucky. So many of them had to get postponed to much later dates, and parades and all this great fun stuff. So I thank all of our presenters for sharing this great information on the importance of voting. And of course, to those who came here with us today, and then to those who will be watching, because I will be sharing this on our YouTube channel. But does anyone have any questions before we wrap up tonight? And you can either unmute yourself and ask, turn your camera, or you can put it in the chat. All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to end the recording, but everyone enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope to see you at some more events. I will say for the Women's Center, we will have on November the 10th, our 18th annual Women's Empowerment Luncheon with our special guest speaker, Mrs. Maddie Jones, who's a local civil rights activist. So we're really excited to be able to have her come speak. And so on our website, on our social media, you can find out information on how to register for this free event. But it's November 10th from 11:30 to 1 p.m. and it'll be here on Microsoft Teams. So thank you.
Thank you.